Do you know how many fresh lips of women are needed to sew a human skin bracelet? Do you know how many fresh lips of women are required to make a human skin bracelet? The answer is 7. There were 7 consecutive homicides. There were 7 women with the same death condition. Before they breathed their last, they all endured inhuman torture, but the real culprit cunningly remained hidden for 15 years. This latest Polish suspense film Red Scene is adapted from the best-selling novel The Original Color of Extreme Evil. It is also adapted from a real-life incident. Both the story and the visuals are extremely intense. Just a few days after its release, it has made its way onto the popular movie rankings. After watching it, one can't help but gasp in horror. Without further ado, let's start the main feature. By the seaside of a certain city in Poland, a female corpse was washed ashore with the tide. She was completely naked. There was no identification document. There was no mobile phone. The moment the female corpse was turned over, all the policemen at the scene were too astonished to speak. Her lips were cut off by the murderer like spoils of war. The death scene was extremely tragic. Coincidentally, the forensic doctor recognized that the deceased was named Serafina. She came from the upper class. Her mother, Isolde, was a civil judge. Her father, Selim, was a renowned financial lawyer. It's a pity that the couple's marriage only existed in name. Selim's infidelity and affairs have become a common occurrence. He and Isolde pretend to be an affectionate couple in front of others, maintaining a veneer of respectability. Upon receiving the notice from the police, Isolde rushed to the morgue immediately. Seeing Serafina's face, with eyes wide open in death, she nodded dully. She took the report handed over by the police expressionlessly, until she got back into the car again. She began to tremble with fear, as if waking up from a dream. Police officer Riker wanted to step forward to comfort her, but he stepped on the gas pedal and directly crashed into the car in front. It was only at this moment that he finally couldn't hold back and burst into tears. The forensic doctor conducted an autopsy on Serafina. Her legs were removed after her death. There were old bruises all over her body from beatings. The private parts were also seriously injured 15 years ago in a bar named Lyra. Had almost the same death appearance. The police found a large amount of DNA in her fiancé Jet's house. Coincidentally, Jet was released from prison a few days ago. Does this mean that he committed the crime again after being released from prison? Jet insisted that he had never met Serafina, and he was deeply in love with the first victim, Lyra. The engagement ring he prepared for her is still kept until now, but the police found a blood-stained shirt in the yard. This once again confirmed the evidence of his crime. According to past experience, the sooner a suspect is identified as the murderer, the more likely he is to be innocent. This time is no exception. Jet left a word-checked dock. While Riker went to get some water, Jet opened the window of the office and jumped out. Jet proved his innocence with his death. This also made Riker full of doubts. The superior officer advised him to close the case as soon as possible. In this way, the families of the victims would think that the murderer had received the corresponding punishment. Why not? Serafina's funeral was held as scheduled. Not far away there stood a man with a serious expression. Unfortunately, when Riker turned around, he had already left. The forensic doctor brought his young son Axel. He came to offer condolences. Together, Axel and Serafina had been friends for many years. The two of them often went to the pet club to drink themselves drunk. It is said that Serafina fell in love at first sight with the owner of the club, but this person was by no means a good guy. Serafina's subsequent degradation seemed to be related to him. Riker visited a renowned criminal psychology professor. He speculated that the murderer should be a male aged between 30 and 60. He may not have received a good education. Cutting off the victim's lips should be for some kind of collection. Lyra's father still keeps her photo. She was an excellent girl. She shouldn't have been the first college student in the family. Her father didn't know that she had worked at the shipping club, and a photo of her with a strange man caught Riker's attention. Since Serafina's death, Isolde had been in a trance all day long. She couldn't eat anything for several days. She got drunk every day while hugging Serafina's coat. Finally, she couldn't bear it anymore. She stepped into the icy sea water. Selim exerted a great deal of effort to pull her out of the sea, and after waking up, Isolde realized that she should do something about her daughter's death. She told Riker, who came to investigate, that Serafina had also worked at the boathouse club before her death. She always wore a ruby ring that had been passed down in the family, but the police didn't find this ring. The clues of the two cases both pointed to the boathouse club. This is the most popular party place for local young people. They gather here and enjoy themselves with music and singing every night. The behind-the-scenes boss seems to be a ruthless person. When the female bartender learned that Riker was here to investigate the case, she didn't dare to say anything. She told him to ask the boss lawyer if he had any questions, but surprisingly their lawyer turned out to be Serafina's father Selim. Early in the morning, Isolde heard Selim talking on the phone with a mysterious person. It seemed that Serafina's case was mentioned. Isolde followed him all the way and went to number 5 Lesina Street with Selim. She saw him meeting with the mysterious person. Wasn't this person the man who had been watching from a distance at Serafina's funeral? Isolde asked her friend to help with the investigation. By chance she saw the USB flash drive on Ceylon's desk. Inside it there were a large number of registration records of shell companies. The registrant was a man named Malachi. At the same time Riker visited the forensic doctor again. He compared the two cases. Just like Serafina Lyra's fatal injury was on the head. The lips were cut off with a paper cutter. In a similar way there were signs of damage in certain parts which seemed to be caused by things like clubs and bottles. There were signs of damage in certain parts which seemed to be caused by things like clubs and bottles. There were traces of damage caused by things like bottles. Before leaving, Riker greeted Axel. He nervously hit something. To change the subject, Axel mentioned that Serafina worked as a bartender at the dog club. At the dog club, she had an affair with the boss Victor. Whenever Axel took his new girlfriend to the club, Serafina would always give him special treatment. She looked very charming. A certain man sitting nearby was deeply attracted to her. Who would have thought that this man Malachi was the real big boss of the club? He was also the most ruthless gang leader in the area. Victor was just one of his subordinates. Riker checked the missing person cases in recent years. Several girls had worked at the shipping club. The clues found by Isolde also pointed directly at the behind-the-scenes boss of the shipping club, Malachi. The two of them exchanged clues. They keenly sensed that the case must be related to Malachi. Jet, who fell from the building, was just a scapegoat. Riker wanted to ask two of his colleagues, Griffin and Spider, to help with the investigation. But when Griffin saw Malachi's photo, his expression changed greatly. He said that a few years ago a girl accused Malachi of attempted murder, and she withdrew the accusation just a dozen minutes later. After that she vanished without a trace. Malachi is an extremist. He always resorts to any means to achieve his ends. Falling into his hands, one would be severely tortured even if not killed. That night Isolde went to find the forensic doctor, and it also made us understand why she never minded Ceylon's infidelity. It turned out that the two of them had their own distinct private lives. Isolde learned from the forensic doctor that there were traces of violation all over Serafina's body before her death. She felt deeply grieved for her daughter. She covered her face and wept. Isolde made an agreement with Riker to search Serafina's room. The night before, the forensic doctor told Isolde that he had also examined the bodies of several other homicides. The victims' body shapes, ages, and death conditions were the same as Serafina's, and their lips were all missing, and they were all employees of the dog club before their deaths. Riker searched a box of contraband in Serafina's room. He speculated that it should have been brought out from the club in addition. Besides, Riker managed to get some information from his superior not long ago. His colleague Spider had received a report of a case, and the person who reported the case was Serafina. That day Malachi invited Serafina and Victor to his luxurious mansion. In front of everyone he said that he wanted to marry Serafina as his wife. For a man this is a blatant humiliation, but Victor was afraid of Malachi's power and influence. They dared neither to be angry nor to speak out. Malachi, in the presence of everyone, punished a junior member who betrayed the gang. He cut off the junior member's lips alive. Serafina was so frightened that she trembled all over. She tried desperately to hold back the tears that were about to burst out. Finally, a sharp blade slashed across the junior member's throat. When Serafina regained her senses, she had already gotten into the returning car with Victor. Serafina was scared, but Victor was even more terrified. Having worked for Malachi for such a long time, he naturally knew how ruthless Malachi was. Even if he tried to escape, he couldn't get out of Malachi's grasp. So Victor simply offered Serafina to Malachi. If she refused, he would resort to violence. He beat her until she was unable to fight back. She couldn't even say no anymore. After going through all these tortures, Serafina finally realized staying in the club any longer would mean certain death. She went to the police station to seek help from the police. After listening to her account, the police officer Spider, who received her that day, asked calmly, "Are you sure you want to report this?" Then Spider dialed a phone number and handed the phone to Serafina. After hearing the voice on the other end of the line, Serafina broke down. Malachi had far too much influence. There were even his informants in the police station. What awaited Serafina was, naturally, it was a torture 100 times more brutal than ever before. Malachi stood at the entrance of the mansion exuding an intimidating aura without even showing anger. He was emanating a chilling atmosphere all over. Serafina was forced to go in. She didn't come out until night. When she got home, she accidentally alerted Isolde, but fearing that her parents would also be implicated, she didn't want to reveal too much. She just locked herself in the bathroom and cried desperately. If she had asked a few more questions at that time, perhaps Serafina wouldn't have met her death. Thinking of this, Isolde went to the club alone. She wanted to find out more clues. When she mentioned Serafina's name, the bartender didn't reveal much. Instead, after giving a look to Malachi, he handed her a glass of lemonade. A blonde woman leaned close to Isolde and whispered to her. The bartender put something in the water. she had already been targeted by Malachi. The only way to leave was through the window in the restroom. The reason for reminding Isolde was that it was because Serafina used to be the only close friend of the blonde woman. When Isolde finally realized that she needed to escape, the effect of the drug had already taken hold. She forced herself to use her last bit of reason to find the restroom and lock the door from the inside. With the help of several girls outside the window, she managed to escape. Malachi's henchmen were hot on her trail. At a critical moment, Isolde got into a car. Just before fainting, she stepped on the gas pedal and drove straight towards several police officers. Finally, she was saved. The process of finding the truth was indeed torturous. Fortunately, on Riker's side, through that bag of contraband, he found the fingerprints belonging to Victor. He had no criminal record in any files. He disappeared mysteriously after Serafina's death. No matter how one looked at it, he seemed suspicious. Riker found Victor's sister. She said that she hadn't seen him for a long time, but Riker's sharp mind made him realize that the sister was lying. Sure enough, after following her to an abandoned building, he found Victor hiding there. Riker patiently persuaded him. He promised that as long as Victor provided clues, let him turn into a tainted witness and receive a lenient sentence, but Spider suddenly rushed in. Without saying a word, he raised his gun and shot Victor dead. Riker thus lost his only witness. This mistake gave the Superior another chance to find fault. He ordered Riker to pack up and leave his job next month. The case then came to a standstill. Isolde mentioned when Serafina was 14 years old she was violated during a summer camp. Since then she has become a completely different person. If there had been a little more care at that time, would Serafina not have given herself up to vice? And would the whole family not have been doomed? No one expected that Ceylon, who had a change of heart, would actually become the key to solving the case. In fact, a week before Serafina was murdered, she had turned to Ceylon for help. He originally wanted to seek justice for Serafina, but Malachi still had Serafina's photos in his hand. As a father, he wanted to do his best to ensure his daughter's safety, so he reached a cooperation with Malachi. They set up a number of shell companies to cover up Malachi's illegal business. They planned to send Serafina abroad at a specific time, but it was all too late. She still couldn't escape. But strangely, when Ceylon called to question Malachi, he stubbornly refused to admit that he had murdered Serafina. In Ceylon's USB drive, there were all pieces of evidence of Malachi's crimes. With this clue, the Superior finally relented. He agreed to let Riker lead a team to arrest Malachi. Armed police officers broke into the mansion with their weapons. They didn't spare any of the underlings who blocked their way. Malachi seemed to have anticipated the outcome. He calmly surrendered. In the basement of the mansion, there were full of props. Each of them was telling the story of Malachi's crimes. After Malachi got in the car, he curled his lips into a meaningful smile. This time Riker was more cautious. He asked Spider to get out of the driver's seat and asked Kutu to drive Malachi back to the police station. They had long known that Spider was a corrupt police officer working for Malachi, and Malachi could no longer force a smile. The forensic department inspected the mansion. Unfortunately, every single prop had been cleaned. They couldn't find any DNA. Even the boathouse cloud had been tidied up spotlessly. There wasn't the slightest loophole at all. Suddenly Riker thought of something. He went to the detention room and checked the personal belongings that Malachi had handed over. Sure enough, inside them, he found a bracelet. It was sewn with the lips of 7 girls. This time Malachi finally stopped quibbling. He admitted to 7 murder cases, including that of Lyra, and the cases of disappearances, all of which were committed by him. But he refused to admit that he had murdered Serafina. Riker just took it as his quibbling and didn't think much of it. He gave the order to detain and try Malachi. Spider, who had been working for Malachi, also couldn't escape the law. Finally, he died at the hands of justice. It seemed that everything had been settled. Isolde expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Riker after asking. She learned that the reason why Riker was so determined, besides having a passion for justice, there was one of the most important reasons. His daughter was also named Serafina. At night, Isolde, who finally let go of the burden, went on a date with the forensic doctor to his old house. Axel accepted their status as a couple. He sat down and had dinner with them. The 3 of them mourned for Serafina together. Axel said sorrowfully he had always regarded Serafina as his best friend, but Serafina thought that she was happier when staying with others. Isolde fell silent because he didn't know his daughter well. The dinner ended in an eerie atmosphere. Before leaving, Axel said something to the forensic doctor again. It was something inexplicable. You should tell him what that thing is exactly. Isolde didn't ask further. On the other side, Riker, who was at the gas station, glanced back at the cashier not far away. His act of hiding the cigarette caught Riker's attention to his ring. He remembered what Isolde had said. Serafina always wore a ruby ring. Riker suddenly remembered an important detail that had been forgotten when he went to the forensic doctor's house that day. The thing that Axel had hidden turned out to be a ruby ring. At the same time, Isolde also understood what that thing was he saw Seraphina's toothbrush in the bathroom, and on the table in Axel's room there was a ruby ring conspicuously placed. His mind was instantly struck as if by a bolt of lightning. He pretended to be calm. He hid the doubts in his heart. He asked the forensic doctor to call a taxi for him to go home, but he was subdued with a shot of sedative. When he woke up again, Isolde had already been tied up in the basement. The forensic doctor didn't intend to make things difficult for him. Not only was the binding not very tight, but also a paper cutter was placed on the tool table. It was convenient for him to easily cut the zip ties on his hands. Isolde went upstairs cautiously. The forensic doctor had been waiting in the living room for a long time. He told the truth about Seraphina's death in detail in order to avoid Malachi. Seraphina could only ask Axel, the only one she trusted, to let her stay temporarily in his home. The deep love hidden in Axel's heart could no longer be concealed. The goddess whom he had always looked up to and who was so lofty had become so down and out. It finally gave him the courage to reach out for her, but who would have thought that after his confession, he was mercilessly rejected by Seraphina? Axel was not convinced. Why could Seraphina accept anyone but refused to accept him alone? Axel grabbed Seraphina's head and bent it several times until she completely lost her breath. Axel took off that ruby ring, and in order to help him get away with the crime, the forensic doctor thought of the case of Lyra's slashed lips that he had taken over 15 years ago. He thought the real murderer was Jet. Besides, Jet had just been released from prison recently, so he imitated the way Lyra died. He created the same wounds on Seraphina's body. He wanted to frame Jet for the crime, but who would have thought that the situation deviated more and more from his plan, and Axel, who had a change of heart, intentionally left the ring behind. He guided Isolde to find it. A moment later, Riker, who realized that the case was not closed, also drove to the forensic doctor's old house. As soon as he arrived, he heard a gunshot. When he rushed in nervously, he found that the forensic doctor had already committed suicide by shooting himself. The case came to an end when Axel turned himself in at the police station the next day. And so it was all over. The deeply hidden hatred often unfolds through love. Love is the derivative of hatred, but it is also a disease of love. Salem's protective love for Seraphina, Isolde's belated love for Seraphina both belong to positive love. However, Victor's abnormal love for Seraphina, Malachi's possessive love for Seraphina. Each of them is filled with selfishness. These kinds of love are often accompanied by harm. Over time, it gives rise to hatred. As the hatred grows, reason takes a back seat. People will always do things beyond the normal range. However, the most significant difference between human beings and animals, the reason why we are called human beings, lies in our ability to control our emotions. Doing something that one knows one shouldn't do. Is it because one can't control oneself, or because one doesn't want to control oneself? The answer lies in everyone's heart.